Okay, it's another late night of napping. I'm going to try to reduce this with natural tools into a biface. And I got a request to do some material that's very similar to European flint. Hopefully this is similar enough. I have another nodule also. And basically many of these darker flints work the same way. Uh, this one is a chert actually, and this one is more of a flint. So let me work this one first. I'm going to work it with natural tools, if I haven't mentioned that already. I'm going to try to go slow and explain exactly what I do when I biface these. Now this particular one is difficult in its shape. It's not a straightforward zigzag around the edges. It takes a little bit of an imagination to do this type of work. Because what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be producing a biface. Now if I just want to produce flakes, it's a different story. I can just hit anywhere without thinking, for the most part. But if I want to create an actual biface, it requires a little more advanced planning. Okay. So I'll try my best to reduce this to a usable biface. Alright. With natural tools, while explaining exactly what I'm doing. You guys can't seem to get enough of this, so I'll get back to my regularly scheduled programming eventually. Okay. So the actual plan doesn't really remove flakes. Once I figure out where I'm going to remove a flake, it's all subconscious with the actual flake removal. I can kind of plan out where I want the flakes, but once I start flaking, I don't have to think about it too much. That's where the skill comes in. The skill is in the actual producing of the flakes, and that's largely subconscious. Some people can pick up on it right away and not have to think about how to produce a flake. Some people have to try over and over and over, think about it before they actually produce flakes. But once they start producing flakes, it's just a repetitive type of endeavor. Eventually you don't have to think about it. But on this one here, like I said, I'm going to try to make a biface. So let's see. Now that one worked better than I thought. This flint is actually probably better quality than I thought too. I figured maybe it would take off a little bit of this mass, but it took off a good chunk. Okay. That makes it a little bit easier. Why did I hit it there instead of anywhere else? Well, let's see. Let me try to analyze this. Where did I hit it? I think I hit that. No, I hit it right here. I was going to hit this over here, but I was going to hit it that way. I hit this over here. I pretty much knew what the material was going to look like. This was not, there's very thin cortex here. So I was kind of looking at that. It's very thin all around, but this one was very thin. And it had a platform that I considered to be pretty good, at a pretty good angle. I thought it'd be easy to take this mass off. I didn't realize it would go so far and remove that much. But it's a good thing. Next flake I think I'm going to take with an easy platform is right here. Although this is kind of what they call steep, right? This is where the flake's going to come off from. This is the platform, It's steep because if this was a cliff, you know, you'd fall off. It's a steep cliff. If it was sloped, it wouldn't be as steep, right? If it was better sloped, it'd be better as for a platform, but I think this is good enough. It's not quite 90. There is a little bit of a... It feels a little bit like a good platform. It probably could be better. It's a little bit concave in this area, so it kind of holds the stone in that area, you know. If I were to hit somewhere else that's completely rounded, like right here, if I were to hit this surface, I could probably remove a flake here, but it's dicey, it's risky, because I could send in all kinds of strange cracks going in all directions, right? So, I mean, there may be an area where it's better, but I'm just going to hit this because it's a larger mass. This is the largest mass on the edge, right? So it just, the eye naturally gravitates to, I gotta get rid of that. So let's try it, see what happens. Again, it's pretty good quality flint, so it took what I wanted off here, but then it continued, took a little bit more off. Okay, so now this stone is getting a little bit large for this piece. Maybe one more flake. Large because I'm going to be hitting the sides of this platform. The platforms are getting smaller, so the larger the surface of your striker, the larger the platforms have to be, or the more difficult it is to hit a small platform unless it's isolated. I don't usually isolate my platforms. I look for opportunistic areas. So this is an opportunistic flake here. As you can see, even though this angle was very steep, I was still able to produce a flake in a reasonable way without going too far and slicing too far into the stone. Usually what happens when you have a steep angle, if you remember the angle of applied force compared to the actual fracture angle, it's dicey when you hit such a steep platform. But it worked out okay because it was a glancing blow, glancing. It wasn't straight in. I'm going to do another glancing blow. The force is this way, as much as possible this way, so that when it does fracture, I'm not going to dig in too deep. If I were to hit this way, that fracture angle is going to go up into that mass. I have another video where it explains that fracture angle with a little piece of bent wire that I have in the video, so study that a little bit more. I forget the angle already, but I tell you precisely what the angle is. Okay, so I'm going to hit this and see what happens. I'm trying to follow this ridge here. Try to find a more narrow area on this stone and hit it with a glancing blow. Not inward, not straight, an arced glancing blow. There's an arc to it. Okay? So I missed. Instead of hitting down this way, I hit right there instead, which is easy to do with a large stone. You miss your strike area. Now I don't really have much of an opportunity now. It's probably going to crush if I hit that. I can try it anyway. It's going to be a glancing blow again. Yeah, it's just crushing. So I'm going to go to a smaller tool, smaller stone. I'm going to see if I can create a platform somewhere to start removing some more mass. So I'm going to a smaller, same type of stone, same quartzite, sparkly type stone. Okay, so I want to try to get rid of the mass here. You know, it's like a massive turtleback. So let's see. Hit there, take this off so I can hit that way. So you're planning one step ahead. When you're building a platform, intentionally instead of opportunistically, you're thinking one step ahead. Let's see, where do I need a platform? I need it right there. You know, to take this mass off, I need a platform right here. But I had this mass here first. It's not a very good platform. Because it's kind of high. It's kind of high toward this edge. I mean, the angle's pretty good, but it needs to be lower, more like this here. You know, at center line would be ideal, or below is the easiest. I could have probably taken off a little bit of that mass by just hitting the end, but it's better to have something more solid and lower. And I'm going to dull it so that I'm not going to misjudge how high I'm going to hit because I've got too much of a weak area hanging down. If that's still hanging down by like a 1/16 of an inch, I'm going to think it's solid behind it, but it's really not. See how it's concave? I've got to bring back that edge so I have a convexity, or at least a flat area for the flake to initiate from. So I'm not just aiming for a what will result in a thin flake, in a thin area. See how it is dished in there? It looks like I'll take out a big flake, but since it's dished, it's going to be a shallow flake, and it's not going to be strong enough to pull apart the bottom half from the top half. It's just going to be shallow and pop out somewhere here instead of driving into the mass. It needs to be strong, both in terms of getting you an idea, or giving you an idea of how high to hit it, and also to prevent thin or crushing type of flaking. So I need to hit higher up. You get used to how much mass you need to remove a flake easily. I think this has enough mass to remove a flake easily down this ridge, but we'll see. You can always increase the speed to get more impact force. If you have enough impact force, like if I was going to use this one, I don't need to have as much speed. But with a smaller tool, I can get in, hit that platform better than I can with this wider one. I risk hitting the sides and stuff. So go to a smaller one. Could I hit that with Antler? Or yeah, I could probably. you get used to the feel for this kind of stuff after a while. I could probably hit that with the Antler and also produce a large flake. But a hammerstone will do it more aggressively. At this stage, you kind of need aggressive flake removals. The Antler is for more refined work in general. So just as a general rule, I tend to follow general rules and be expedient and not try to get fancy. Unless there's some special issues in damage control, I can't do any other way than trying to get fancy with it. But this is just pretty simple stuff. Alright, let's see. So I hit barely on the tip. Now I could have hit higher than that, but that was okay because it looks like it took off a pretty good chunk of that turtleback. Alright, so where else can I hit? I could probably hit again here. And you know, it has no cortex, so it's a pretty decent area to hit. I've got this sticking out, so I'm going to knock that back. I don't want any pointy areas at this stage or weak areas. So while I'm trying to think about where else I'm going to hit, save some time by removing some of the weak spots. And I'll notice places where I can hit. You know, I'm trimming basically with a more narrow part of the hammerstone. Trimming just means small flakes. They can be long, they can be short. Just, I'm thinking one step ahead, right? This looked like a pretty good platform, but it's still kind of high. It's high up near the surface here, so I say, well, lower would be better. So let's lower it by removing a flake in the opposite direction. To lower this, and now it would be better now for hitting into this area. It has a little bit of cortex here, so if I could trim that off, it'd be better. Cortex absorbs impact, so you think you're hitting hard, but the cortex is going to reduce some of that energy because it's crushy, it's powdery, it's porous. It's not solid like this stuff. So it will absorb energy and reduce your strike. So you have to hit much harder, and sometimes it doesn't even work. So I can hit this platform here into the mass there, or this platform here into that mass as well. And you remove the weak areas just so you can have an accurate picture of how high you need to hit up on the platform. Now, why is that important? If you want a long flake, hit higher so that you can actually produce a thick flake that has the strength to go long. Yes, you can produce long, thin flakes, but that's the whole thing in knapping. You're trying to produce long, thin flakes. That's the most difficult thing. That's what everyone works to achieve. You just can't start out by saying, I'm going to make long, thin flakes from the very beginning. You might be able to once in a while, and then think to yourself, well, if I can do it once, I can do it again. No. Producing long, thin flakes is the hardest thing to do. You don't start with the hardest thing to do. So start with thick, long flakes. Those are easier. They have the strength to travel. You don't have to think about it too much. You don't have to prepare the flake path very much. What do I mean by that? If there's any weird obstacles along the way, you'll need to flake into that obstacle to remove it or something, so you can prepare for a long thin flake. Okay? Prepare the contour as well. Make sure it's completely convex, very steady. You shouldn't have any irregularities in the flake path for a long thin flake, that sort of thing. And the platform, the better it is, with the less chatter and the less damage to it, the better for a long thin flake. So I can hit there, I can hit there now. So it's just up to me what I want to do. I can also start using Antler at this point. I may want to do that. Antler, it's easier to adjust to making long thin flakes with Antler than it is with hammerstone, in my opinion. Now, some people can use hammerstones for long thin flakes, but the consistency of the stone is important. The guys who are experts at these long thin flakes with hammerstones usually use a softer hammerstone. Like a sandstone or a limestone. Why is that? Because you want a stone, where to go? You want the stone to remain in contact with the platform on the follow through. If it's hard, it tends to bounce. That's the secret. A softer one will remain in contact because it dimples. That dimple will surround the platform somewhat, like Antler does. Remain in contact with the platform long enough to produce momentum behind the flake to produce a long flake. Now, thin flake is easier with Antler because it grips a smaller platform easier than a stone will. A stone can grab a smaller platform, but not as easily. Usually a stone prefers a stronger platform because stones are very crushy, they're very smashy. They don't grip the edge and peel off a flake as well as a piece of Antler, so it's easier to adjust to Antler with the thin flakes. Okay, if I had a choice to produce thin flakes between hammerstone and Antler, I would choose Antler. Okay, do I want a thin flake here? Yes and no. Yes, thin flakes would work. I could do a series of thin flakes. I have a large enough platform here I could strike several thin flakes if I wanted to. Or I could do one large one. It comes with experience. Sometimes you want to do small ones. If it's delicate stone, you don't want to hit too hard on the end because it could snap in half or snap the end off if it's delicate. There's a lot of considerations going into this. If you want to produce a biface, if you already have in mind what you want, if you're just producing flakes off of this thing, you can just go to town and just produce flakes off of it. There's not much thinking involved. But if you want to try to preserve the mass of it, that's when you start getting into the strategy. Once you decide where to hit, your memory, your muscle memory, your subconscious takes over on the actual strike. Okay? New guys, they don't have muscle memory when they strike. And thinking about how to strike is not going to get you there. That's why it's difficult. You need to develop the muscle memory. You need to develop the subconscious and the second nature aspect of removing flakes. Thinking about it actually interferes with your efficiency when it comes to actually producing a flake. Thinking about it increases your efficiency when you're planning on preserving as much of it as possible. Okay. So what am I going to do here? I don't know. Let's see. I guess I could hit it with Antler, but I don't really like that platform that much. Yes, I don't have much of an option here. I got to be very precise with it. It's basically an opportunistic platform. Now, if I isolated it more, I could hit it easier with the Antler. I could hit it this way. I hope I hit it just right. I could hit it with this, but I don't think I'll be as accurate with this large face on this hammerstone as I could with a more narrow portion of the Antler. So, these things are the strategy before you actually hit. Once you decide you're going to hit, then everything should be subconscious after that. Okay. So I've decided I'm going to use this, and I'm just not going to think about how I'm hitting it. It's all muscle memory for the most part. I do have to think somewhat about this angle and this and the approach and all that somewhat, but not very much. The less I think about that, the better. So it's a relatively long, thin flake. Now I can move over and remove another flake. I don't know if I want to do it just yet. There's still cortex on this side, and I need to get rid of it, so let's see. And if I get rid of this, it'll give me more platform area here to strike into that mass. Again, the thinking part is removing this. The non-thinking part is the actual striking. I'm just using my muscle memory to make these strikes. And if I was thinking about it a lot, I could probably not be doing this over and over and over again. And just looking where it would be best to hit, and then plan slowly more and slow it down so that I could increase my chances of actually removing a flake in that area. But I don't know, I just kind of tried to remove a flake, didn't work. Let's try something else. Seems like it might work, but it didn't. So let's try to plan it a little bit better. See what I can think of. Thinking about this really isn't helping me too much. Describing what I'm doing really isn't helping that much either. So I just go and get rid of some of those weak areas while I relax my brain a little bit, and maybe I'll spot something that looks good and then take a shot. So yeah, I spotted a little area I could hit, took a shot, and it was okay. Yeah, so I need that platform there. It looks pretty good. I'm going to need a fast hit because of the cortex. My brain is telling me cortex is going to require a harder hit unless I get it off, take it off. And it's not going to come off very easily, so I'm going to have to hit this pretty hard right there. So then stop thinking about it, and then just rely on the muscle memory. I was too low that time. Let's try it again with a little bit duller area. Why am I hitting there instead of there? I don't know really. I could probably hit there. It'd be better to hit there, maybe. I don't know. It's really not that good of a platform. I could hit it. I mean, I could probably get a flake to come off, but let's see. I don't know. We'll continue on the next segment. Okay, so I'll just stop thinking about it for now. And you can just watch, and I'll just narrate a little bit. In between strikes, I guess. See where I'm hitting? I'm hitting that really strong area, and I have an incipient crack right now, which probably means it's going to scoop out something. It's not going to be that great. I'll hit it again, exact same spot, and see if it'll continue to travel. Yeah, it did scoop out a little bit. It wanted to come out, but since it's a higher quality flint, it did push some of that flake further out, and it feathered the termination. Still not ideal. It's not an ideal surface there. So yeah, I could probably hit that now. And you know, get adjusted to how the antler is working. This is a moose antler with a skull attached. So it hit right on the edge. It produced a pretty good initiation. Looks like it did take off a good portion of that. Now, if we refit some of this, was it advantageous for me to take this flake off first and then this flake? Or could I have just taken this flake off and maybe it would have been, you know, wider and it wouldn't have this scoop out? Yeah, I mean, you could go back and refit your work and see what would have been maybe a better strategy. But your strategy can be perfect if you don't know how to remove these flakes, or you don't have that muscle memory. It doesn't really matter too much what your strategy is. I could have hit this one and scooped out that flake just like I hit this one. I could have had a scoop out right here with not much removed. That's a possibility. I did hit this one harder than I hit that one, mainly because this is on the side, which is easier to use power on. Easier in the sense of not breaking it. Got to be careful when you hit the end. You can get end snap. So less power on the end produced this flake here, and I ended up with a pretty good ridge that then I exploited. It had a ridge already. Right, it already had a ridge. I could have exploited it sooner, but I don't know, it just felt like it just felt more opportunistic to hit this one. pretty much the same as far as choice goes. Okay. So now it's fairly flat. I still have this cortex where I would like to have a platform. I'd like to have a platform wherever there's a ridge. Wherever there's a ridge, I'd like to have a platform, an opportunistic place to hit. But since I still have a lot of issues around the piece, I'm just going to skip that for now and go around and look for other ways to biface this. And I'll come back to that later. Why? I don't know. There's many different strategies. Not everyone is going to do this the same way. And you don't have to do it the same way. You don't even have to do it the same way yourself between different stones, you know. You can change it up. Keep in mind your limits on what you can do with each flake. If you don't have the muscle memory, if you don't have the skill in producing long, thin flakes, like every new guy wants to do in the beginning, you're not going to be able to get those long, thin flakes. So just do the short ones. Plan on doing the easy flakes. If your tool isn't working, switch it out. Don't be afraid to change out your tools, even if you end up with something like that. This bounces, the hammerstones will bounce, and they'll produce stuff like that because of the bounce. You know, you're not maintaining contact with the platform long enough for it to push all the way through, so it shatters before it feathers out. Now, could I refit? Yeah, if I found that flake, you know, sometimes you can refit and re-hit. I usually don't. I don't bother with that stuff. But since that's annoying me, I'm going to try to get rid of it now. Again, it's very discretionary. Your mind will change back and forth. It'll seem like it's good, but then it won't, and then yeah, maybe it is. No, I don't know. It depends on how it develops. If you want to try to do a platform and you're trying to develop it and get rid of the cortex and it's not working and all that, you just change your mind and do something else. If it doesn't look really good, if you want to do something else, change it up. You don't have to stay on the same course, you know. You just look around. The way I nap, it's opportunistic. I just try different things, and if it looks good, I do it. It's a pretty even combination between conscious and unconscious activity. Sometimes I think about it a lot, sometimes I don't at all. It goes back and forth. Now this one is pretty isolated, but I didn't isolate it on purpose. It's still pretty opportunistic at this stage. I can hit that, and I think I can remove a good flake, because this is a high spot. Just to make the contour look a little bit better. I wasn't planning on removing a large flake. You know what I mean? just to make the contour look a little bit better. As a new guy, when you get these long, thin flakes, don't expect to get those every time. Alright, so I took a little sidetrack because I'm still wondering how I'm going to hit this. I want to hit this across to get rid of, these step fractures. It's easier to get rid of it this way than to try to power through them, of course, or come in from the other side. It's easier just to run a flake parallel to the step so that when this flake fans out, hopefully that edge of that step fracturing is the edge of the flake, and this one, who knows where it's going to go, but it should pretty much fan out in the usual way. Even though it has some cortex, I'm still going to try to hit it, see what happens. Yeah, I lost a lot of energy on that strike, so I didn't get very far. But it's not a big deal. I can still come in from the other side. That kind of thing. So yeah, I'm just trying to get rid of the cortex. I don't like this area here. These platforms are not ideal. This is not ideal, but it's close enough to remove short flakes. I'm glancing this way like that, just so I won't drive inward because it's too concave in this direction, but it's okay in that direction. Not ideal, obviously, but at this stage I don't really care about ideal. Some guys do, but I don't mind all this chatter and all this seemingly incompetent flaking at this stage. It really doesn't bother me all that much. I mean, it doesn't matter to me that much either. All this is going to be gone anyway eventually. So I'm just trying to create a platform here. Since I messed this one up, I'm trying to create one on this side. And the strategy is thinking one step ahead, right? Or two steps ahead. But the actual flake removal, you don't think about the actual flake removal. You just think about the process. Now again, I have cortex here. Yeah, but I'm still going to try to hit that. Maybe I shouldn't, but I don't see how I can get rid of that cortex easily without... Well, yeah, I don't see... I'm already starting to create chatter by trying to brush this way to move the edge back that way to get rid of some of that cortex, but I'm already getting chatter that I don't like. I probably would have liked to have hit it sooner, but now I got to try to fix that. You don't want to hit into the chatter if possible, because it takes energy away from the strike. Why? Because there's partially undetached flakes, and they want to detach first before anything else. So they steal energy from your strike because they want to go first. They don't want the main flake to go. They want to go first, and that removes energy from the rest of the flake. But I'm gonna hit that anyway and see what happens. I'm hitting it pretty hard because there is cortex there. Hit it with a flat spot because I'm gonna swipe it. Why swiping? Swiping works well with a grippy material for your tool. Swiping works well. Actually, it works well with anything, but smashing it can also work. Smashing it more directly in with a hammerstone instead of swiping can work, but usually with larger pieces like this. Smashing into it like with this type of platform is probably easier to remove a flake than it is to try to swipe that. You know, to try to hit like this. Smashing into it will probably give you a fatter flake at this stage when you're working with a bigger piece. But when you're working with this type of piece, smashing it inward is just a little bit too strong. It can crack the whole piece in half. It can take the flake that's way too large. Swiping is a little more gentle. It's also easier on the stone. It prevents a lot of shock. Yada yada yada. There's other things that I just can't think of right now, but it'll be an arced, not a straight in blow, but an arced swipe. It's a lot more downward than it is inward. The arc produces the inward force because it's when I hit with using an arc, there's some inward force, but I'm not planning on it. I'm planning mainly on the downward strike as far as my positioning. The actual strike is subconscious for the most part. That's where the practice of over and over and over and over again gets built into your subconscious. So you don't have to think about the actual strike itself. You can think about setting it up, but the actual strike is mostly muscle memory. Okay. So I hit right on the platform. Didn't think about it. And let's see what happened. Pretty good. Okay, so starting to look more like a biface. Just improving the contour a little bit there. I don't need it this wide here, so I'm going to remove some of the mass and start zigzagging this way. Why did I remove more on that side? It just helped me drop this down a little bit more so I can, start creating a good edge. Fairly level. And it gives me a view of where to hit. It's just part of regularizing the edge when, you start to improve the edge a little bit. It regularizes it, gives you an idea of where to strike, where the masses are and stuff, where the issues could be. The more you regularize it, the better it is for your planning. But yeah, the actual strike, I don't think about the strikes. I just think about setting up for the strike. And the setup is important because I'm making a biface. If I was just making flakes, if all I wanted was those, I would just go to town. Now, yes, you can plan on making certain flakes, but that's not what I'm planning on. And a lot of times, that's not what the knappers back in the day were planning on. They weren't planning on this debitage. If it's good, it's good. If it's not, it's not. They were planning on this biface. Now, in some reduction strategies, they are after the flakes, so it's a different ball game. However, it's more mechanical, because all you want is a flake. You're not concerned about your core. You're concerned mainly about how they're coming off. So it's more mechanical, more intuitive, more subconscious. Now, can it become sophisticated? Yes, it can become very sophisticated and very conscious activity to remove flakes of a certain type. If it's just simple flakes, simple technique. If you want to generate long, thin flakes in a pattern, we're starting to get more into a conscious way of doing it. There's more consciousness involved in the actual setup for each flake, especially if you want to preserve the flakes coming off. There's more sophistication in preserving a specific flake type coming off than there is to just generating a flake scar without concern for the flake itself. If you're not concerned about the flake, it doesn't matter if it breaks in half or it gets all crushy in the beginning or if it goes too long or too short, as much as it would be if you were focusing on preserving the flake you're removing. Right? Sometimes there's a specific flake pattern that just involves more planning. But the actual flake removal, I'm going to say this over and over again, the actual flake removal is not something that you normally think about. That's where the hours and hours of swinging and practicing come in. Your mind keeps that information in the subconscious for the actual flake removals. Let your subconscious take that job over with the actual flake removal. You can plan on where you want to hit, but I think some guys stumble on the flake removals if they're trying to think their way through the whole process. I only thought about the platform and where to hit it and how to set up for it. I didn't think about removing the flake as I was removing it. I didn't know how far that would go, or I wasn't planning on it. I just wanted to remove it from this so I can make it lower. It was a high spot. You know, and follow ridges and stuff. You know, sometimes your brain, well, not sometimes, the more experience you get, the brain just takes over and it knows to follow these things. You don't have to think about it too much. And there's no ridge here. There's no ridge there, but my brain says I can hit there and no problem. Right? There was no ridge there, but I could still remove a flake there. Now, if I was dependent only on my planning, I would say, well, there's no ridge there. I don't know if I should hit because the formula is not right. I'm going across ridges. Doesn't really look right. But, you know, after you hit and hit and hit many times, it's okay. I mean, you know that it is okay to do it subconsciously. Okay. I hope that was making sense. I'm trying to think here. It's very difficult to speak and not contradict yourself. Well, for me anyway. I have to watch for the contradictions. Sometimes I contradict myself. I apologize for that. So what I'm thinking about where the contradictions might be and just letting my subconscious do the work here to even this out. I'm not really thinking about it too much. I'm thinking about what did I say everything right? Did I contradict myself? What was I saying? I normally don't get into this level of analysis. But I've been getting, I always get this question, and I have been getting it a lot lately. How do I thin it down? How do I thin it down? The most trouble I have is thinning it down. I end up with a thick old ugly looking semi biface turtlebacky thing that looks like crap. Now, damage control does take some conscious thought to set up strike so that you can remove defects. You usually can't depend solely on your subconscious to remove or to do damage control to remove bad areas. It usually requires some planning. But the actual strike and the actual flake removals are just subconscious. I knew I needed to get rid of some of that, so I hit there. And I usually just see what happens. I don't really know what's going to happen. And make adjustments according to what happens. See, I'm not concerned about what these look like coming off. If I was, this would be a totally different ball game. Now, does the napper of the Lavalois technique concern himself with the shape of these coming off? Yes, to some extent. But the extent is mainly flat. It just wants flat. The flakes that come off of these Lavalois cores are variable. Some are, I mean, they're all different shapes and sizes, but most of them, or the vast majority, are flat. So it's quite a simple goal to produce a flat flake. It would be difficult if they wanted long, narrow ones of the same consistent size. But yeah, there is some consideration on the shape of the flake, which makes it a little more sophisticated than just simply shattering the stone and hope for the best. But I consider it still intuitive because it's very easy to pick up as far as understanding what's going on without language or without too much conscious thought. There's always going to be some. I'm trying to think of how much conscious thought actually goes into these flakes that I'm removing. There's obviously some. But it's difficult to know exactly how much. Because I do rely a lot on the subconscious. And I just kind of react to what happens. Okay, I'll do a little bit more in the next segment. Okay, I don't need to do too much more on this. It's already a good biface, even though it has a weird edge here. Let's see. I could trim it up a little bit. But yeah, these two. This one is moose antler heavy. Moose antler heavy. This is elk antler. Red deer is very similar. It's a medium weight. It's not a light. It's not heavy either. There are antlers that are lighter. Like I think reindeer antler is lighter. I could be wrong about that, but I think it is. At least the specimens that I got were lighter than elk. I have not used red deer antler. I don't think. I'm trying to remember. I just know the structure is very similar between elk and red deer. Now, why do I use this and not this? I can swing this a little bit faster. And as you get thinner, faster is better because you don't want to shock the piece too much. You want to remove that flake before it knows what's happening. So faster is better. I isolated that on purpose, and whenever I do, I usually get that sort of thing when I isolate a platform, but eventually I'll get better at it. How much conscious thought goes into making platforms? Definitely more than the flaking. There's more conscious thought in preparing platforms than there is in the actual flaking. Now, here I am looking at how far I can flake, because it's starting to get a little bit thin. I don't want to mess it up. It didn't, it's not going to go as far as you want every time, of course. It went far enough, I guess. Try to isolate. Billet work is not as accurate as indirect percussion work, but it can be very effective if you don't do that kind of stuff. Crush the platforms or shatter the workpiece right where the platform is. Yeah, I don't know why. Somehow I just do better with non-prepared surfaces, except for the dulling. I definitely do better when it's duller. When I abrade it slightly so I know it's going to make good contact. Planning on the setup, so that's a conscious activity. But when I actually want to do the strike, I gotta clear my mind. I know I need to hit it harder or softer depending on the size of the flake. I know that ahead of time, so I prepare the platform accordingly. The harder I need to hit, the thicker the platform needs to be, or I'll just blow it away. It won't do anything. These are just opportunistic strikes. I thought that was a good platform. This is an inconsistent area. It's tougher to nap through this, so it may give me trouble later. I got a mass here, so I'm going to try to get rid of some of that. I need to move the platform that way, or the edge that way. At the same time, I'm looking at the symmetry. Which way to move the platform. If I need to lose some width, which way is the best way to move the platform, or to move the edge? See, I'm looking at the symmetry and the overall shape right now. I need to remove some of this, so it looks to me more advantageous to get this side removed first and then go to that side. I don't know why exactly, but it seems to be okay to do it that way. And remove this little mass at the tip here. Yeah. Edge too delicate there. I didn't grind enough last time, so now I grind a little bit more. Okay, so I could go thinner with the billet, a little bit thinner, but it's much safer to proceed with indirect percussion or just try to finish it up. A lot of knives and bifaces are this size and proportions. See if we can get a ratio. Alright, so let's just say let's 50 millimeters. To make this easy to divide, let's see, that's 12, right? So it's like, it's 4 to 1. It's a little bit better than 4 to 1. It's not quite 5 to 1. If I got it down to 10 millimeters, it would be 5 to 1. I could probably get it down to 10 millimeters with one strike here from the base into this mass, or from here into this mass, from here somewhere. We can get it down to 5 to 1 with one flake. If I do it right. I did lose some width, so I gotta get it, make sure I get a deep flake here. Yeah, there's a reason why it's lumpy there. It's a hard area. See, I lost a lot of width. I'm going to try an indirect strike through that mass. See if I can get a good flake. Yeah, it's going to be stubborn. Could cheat and take some off the other side, right? Much more cooperative. Okay. Let's see what we got. That was a series of 3 flakes, right? Or something like that. Okay. I'll cheat a little bit. It's 50. Got it down to about 11 millimeter. Almost 5 to 1. So yeah, I'll go a little bit narrower, and I could send a flake in, a big old flake, and maybe achieve the 5 to 1. But a lot of these bifaces are 3 to 1. 4 to 1 is good. You're doing well if you're 4 to 1. I've got almost 5 to 1. It's going to take some time for you guys to get to 5 to 1, and then as you get more advanced, I would say you can. Let's see, how long did it take me? It took me about 4 years to get down to 6 to 1. I'm trying to think here. I can get down to 9 to 1, but it's taking me 10 years. Anything better than 9 to 1 is a challenge for me. A definite challenge. 6 to 1 is my average. So 5 to 1 to 7 to 1 is my range after 10 years. Okay, so it gives you an idea. This is actually pretty good quality stuff, so it may not be a good comparison to European flint. But it is a flint, and this is a chalk. So hopefully that was a good comparison. It has some translucency. Yeah, and this is raw. It's not heat treated. Okay. Just out of curiosity, I'm going to hit this one. Yeah, this is more like bull gravel. This is a much lesser quality, although the edges are probably better for cutting, for heavy duty cutting. And probably for flint and steel, much better. Yeah, that's really good. How does this one compare? Yes, very good also. Yeah, very good. Both of them are very good. But this is, it feels like this one's better. Yeah. Okay. Hopefully that helps.